He almost cancelled the date the moment he saw her hands trembling slightly as she placed the coffee down. Something about that tiny detail, the way she steadied the cup with both hands, as if even a small spill would matter too much, made him hesitate. It wasn't attraction. It wasn't even curiosity. It was something deeper, something uncomfortable. The kind of feeling that forces you to look at yourself when you'd rather not. What if you met someone who could see through every lie you told to protect yourself? Would you walk away, or stay and risk being known? Michael had spent the last 2 years pretending to be broke. Not struggling, just enough of a mess to be overlooked. Faded jackets, old sneakers, stories about freelance gigs that barely paid rent. It wasn't entirely a lie, he had known struggle once. But now, hidden behind that worn-out image, he owned more than most people in that diner could dream of. Companies, properties, investments. Wealth that insulated him from the world and, ironically, from people. His friends called it a test. He called it survival. After his wife passed away, after watching relatives circle his life like vultures and strangers suddenly find interest in his personality, Michael stopped trusting intentions. Every blind date became an experiment. Would she stay when there was nothing to gain? Most didn't. They smiled politely, checked their phones too often, and found a reason to leave early. Some didn't even finish their coffee. So when Olivia sat across from him in that quiet corner booth, still wearing her apron, her hair tied in a slightly messy bun, he expected the same ending. She had only agreed to sit because her coworker insisted, and even then, she kept glancing toward the counter like she might need to run back at any second. But she didn't leave. She listened. Not in the practiced way people do when they're waiting for their turn to talk, but with a quiet, patient attention that felt almost unfamiliar. Michael told his usual story: unstable work, long hours, nothing impressive, and waited for the shift. The subtle disappointment. The polite withdrawal. It never came. Instead, she nodded slowly, as if she understood more than he was saying. Her eyes didn't judge. They softened. And when he asked about her, she didn't try to impress him either. She spoke about her life simply. Long shifts, rent that always seemed just a little too high, a younger brother she was helping put through school. No dramatics. No self-pity. Just truth. That was the first crack in his carefully built wall. Because if you were in his place, sitting across from someone who had every reason to want more from life and yet asked for nothing from you, wouldn't you start questioning everything you believed about people? Michael found himself coming back to the diner. At first, he told himself it was for the coffee. Then it was habit. But deep down, he knew it was her. Olivia never treated him like a project, never tried to fix him, never asked for more than what he offered. Some days, they barely spoke beyond a few exchanged smiles and quiet conversations between her tables. Other days, she'd sit with him for 5 minutes during her break, talking about small things that somehow felt bigger. It was in those small moments that Michael began to change. He noticed how she skipped her own meal sometimes, brushing it off with a joke about not being hungry. He noticed the worn-out soles of her shoes, the careful way she counted tips at the end of her shift. He noticed everything, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something close to guilt. Not because he had money, but because he had been hiding from the world while people like her were facing it every single day. One evening, a storm rolled in unexpectedly, heavy rain tapping against the diner windows. The place emptied quickly, leaving only a few customers behind. Michael stayed longer than usual, watching Olivia clean tables, her movements slower than usual. When she finally sat down across from him, exhaustion written all over her face, she didn't pretend anymore. She admitted she was behind on rent. It wasn't a dramatic confession. She didn't ask for help. She didn't even look at him when she said it. It was just truth, slipping out because she was too tired to hold it back. And in that moment, Michael felt something break inside him. Because for the first time, his test felt cruel. What kind of man watches someone struggle like that while sitting on a life-changing truth? What kind of man keeps pretending? That night, he couldn't sleep. He thought about every date he had walked away from, every moment he had justified his deception. It had always felt like protection. But now, it felt like cowardice. The next day, he came back early. Not in his usual worn-out clothes, but as himself. The real version. When Olivia saw him walk in, she didn't recognize him at first. The clean suit, the quiet confidence, it was like looking at a different person. And when realization finally dawned, confusion flickered across her face, followed by something deeper. Hurt. Michael didn't rush to explain. He sat down in the same booth and waited. When she approached, her steps were slower this time, cautious, guarded. The warmth was gone, replaced by a distance that he had created. He told her everything. The wealth. The lies. The reasons he had convinced himself were justified. And when he finished, the silence between them felt heavier than anything he had ever carried. Olivia didn't get angry. That would have been easier. Instead, she simply looked at him, her eyes searching for something, maybe honesty, maybe regret. And then she said the one thing he hadn't expected. She said she would have stayed anyway. Not for his money. But for him. That was the moment it truly broke him. Because all this time, he had been testing people, trying to protect himself from being used, and yet, he had been the one using deception. He had been the one holding back. And he almost lost the one person who never asked for anything in return. It didn't end perfectly. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. Olivia didn't suddenly forget the lies or the distance they created. But she didn't walk away either. She gave him something he hadn't earned yet. A second chance. Michael stopped pretending after that. Not just about his wealth but about his fears, his grief, his loneliness. He showed up as himself, fully, honestly, even when it felt uncomfortable. And slowly, carefully, something real began to grow between them. Not built on tests or conditions, but on truth. Before this story ends, take a moment and tell me in the comments, if you were Olivia, would you have walked away, or given him another chance? Because sometimes, the hardest thing isn't finding love. It's learning how to be honest enough to deserve it. And if this story touched your heart even a little, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, only if you truly felt something real.